Arab states break historic agreement and attack Iran on their own, according to initial reports circulating tonight. Meanwhile, explosions hit different parts of Iranian territory, putting the regime on high alert. The information has not yet been accompanied by the official list of nations involved, but the political impact is already heavy. Iran, which for years used militias, threats in the Gulf, nuclear blackmail, and indirect attacks as tools of pressure, now sees the fire reaching sensitive areas of its own territory. Bushehr, Buxar, Chabahar, Bandar Abbas, Konarak, Kerman, and other regions have appeared in reports of explosions, air defense, and damage to strategic structures. While Israel watches, applies pressure, and makes it clear that it can strike back with greater force if the regime insists on pursuing the nuclear and military path.
In fact, in Israel, they estimate that this is what we'll see in the coming days. Tit-for-tat strikes between Iran and the Israelis. And that's the point, between Iran and the United States.
E esse é o ponto. Entre o Irã e os Estados Unidos.
At the moment, Israel is not involved, apparently. It is understood that for now, this is an American issue, not an Israeli one. Although high-ranking officials in Israel want the green light from Donald Trump to resume attacks on Iran.
At night, a question arose that bothers Tehran. If it wasn't the Americans who decided to act, why would Gulf nations break with old caution and strike Iran now? How will the regime explain to its own people that its enemies don't seem to be so afraid anymore? I'll tell you all about it in a moment. If you like this kind of straightforward and no-nonsense content, consider subscribing because we have videos like this every day. The explosions in Iran started being reported in several places at the same time. Bushehr draws attention because it houses the only operational nuclear power plant in Iran. Chabahar carries even more strategic weight because it is the only Iranian deep-water port on the Indian Ocean, outside the Strait of Hormuz. Bandar Abbas is another decisive point because it is linked to Iranian naval control and the pressure the regime tries to exert on international shipping. The information circulating indicates that the attacks hit Bushehr, Jajar, Shogadak, Konarak, Bandar Abbas, and Kerman. There were also reports of explosions in Avas and Chabahar. In some of these locations, the air defense was reportedly activated, which indicates that the regime tried to respond or intercept some threat. However, responsibility remains the most sensitive point. The United States is mentioned in conflicting news reports. At times, they are pointed out as responsible for previous attacks against Iranian targets, but in anteriores contra alvos iranianos. Other reports, a high-ranking American official denies that the American armed forces are carrying out tonight's new wave of attacks. That's when the crisis takes on an even more explosive dimension. If tonight's attacks are not from the United States, the possibility of Gulf nations' involvement changes the stakes of the war. For a long time, Arab governments in the region avoided entering into direct open confrontation with Iran. Even while suffering threats, attacks from groups allied with Tehran, and blackmail over energy and navigation. Now, if these nations have really decided to act on their own, the Iranian regime has lost more than just military positions. It lost the psychological shield it used to intimidate its neighbors. The reason behind this possible turnaround lies in the accumulation of attacks, the deterioration of maritime security, and the Iranian nuclear threat. Iran spent weeks trying to test limits, attacking vessels, targeting bases linked to the United States in Gulf nations, and trying to turn the Strait of Hormuz into a tool of global pressure. But that calculation may have backfired. By trying to scare everyone, Tehran may have pushed Arab nations to a simple conclusion. Waiting for the regime to act first has become too big a risk. The tension also involves the Memorandum of Understanding that should have reduced the clashes about 3 weeks ago. This agreement was fragile from the start and never seemed to truly control actions on the ground. Iran continued to use the regional threat as a weapon. The United States resumed attacks on Iranian targets after accusations of aggression against commercial ships. Israel, even though it says it is not involved in this new exchange of attacks, is closely monitoring everything and keeping its forces ready. The result is a ceasefire that exists on paper but does not withstand the first serious test. Israel appears to be the actor that best understands the logic of the Iranian regime. The Israeli defense minister has already stated that the army is ready to attack Iran a third time with even greater force if necessary. The message is simple. Tehran will not have infinite time to rebuild its nuclear and military threat. Senior Israeli officials are also reportedly pressuring Donald Trump for the green light for a new direct offensive. For now, Israel claims it is not participating in the current attacks, but no one in Tehran can ignore the message. Belgium also joined the debate with an important statement about the Iranian nuclear program. The Belgian Prime Minister said he considers it justifiable to try to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon, although he questioned the execution of the operations. Ziwa Dawira's recent attacks on Iran, aren't you concerned this will overshadow the summit?
Well, I think it is really justifiable to try to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. If the operation was well planned and executed, that would be different. But doesn't it seem like it's not going well?
This position shows that the concern about Tehran is not limited to Israel or the United States. Even European leaders, who are usually more cautious in their statements, acknowledge that Iran's nuclear ambition has become a real threat. Vaz also came into focus with the report of a targeted killing. Lireza Kodadadi, connected to the provincial contract Wali Yasser of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, was reportedly the target of an attack. In Khuzestan province, the pressure against regime structures is not limited to ports and bases. It also appears in figures associated with the internal apparatus of the Revolutionary Guard, which is precisely the force that supports repression, intelligence, militias, and external operations. Meanwhile, Gaza returned to the news with another action by the Israel Defense Forces against a figure linked to the October 7th massacre, Haid Abu Salam, identified as being involved in the kidnapping of Israelis during the attack. The leader from Gaza, killed in a precise strike in the southern Gaza Strip, the Israel Defense Forces stated that he was planning new attacks against Israeli troops. This fact follows the same regional logic. Israel is cutting off threat networks wherever they appear, whether in Hamas, Hezbollah, or the Iranian Axis. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization was also pressured about the tension between Turkey and Israel. Turkey and the North Atlantic Treaty Organization were pressured about the tension between Turkey and Israel. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization was pressured about the tension between Turkey and Israel. When pressed about Netanyahu, Turkey responded by recalling October 7th. Arpal?
Talk about Turkey and Israel. There is tension between them right now. If there were a conflict between Turkey, Israel, and Syria, would that trigger Article 5?
Well, let me say the following. Yeah, President Erdogan is an extremely wise leader. And I completely agree as well with what President Trump said about Erdogan, that he is a wise leader. He has been in this position and in this role for years. So he won't fall for provocations. He will always avoid getting into a situation that gets out of control, because Turkey plays a vital role by hosting this summit. As an important NATO ally, the country is a key mediator in brokering agreements, thanks to President Erdogan and his foreign minister.
What if Mr. Netanyahu makes the conflict unavoidable?
Yes, let me not speculate about that. Because at the end of the day, let's not forget what happened on the 7th.
The sentence carries weight because it puts the central point back on the table. Israel is not reacting to an ordinary dispute. Israel is responding to a network that used massacre, kidnapping, rockets, and terrorism as political methods. Iran tries to sell the idea of resistance for domestic consumption. At the funerals of the supreme leader, supporters of the regime once again chanted war slogans against Israel and the United States. Thank you.
The late brother said, "Kill us, our people will become even more alert." You started 2 nights ago. Did you think we would be afraid of these attacks of yours? No. Actually, we're ready, more prepared than before. We declare this both to you and to the dogs you unleashed in your region. We continue with even more determination than before. Until your dark and evil shadow is removed from this planet, we will not give up resistance and jihad.
But behind the spectacle, the regime faces a harsh reality. Its ports are vulnerable, its bases are under pressure, its air defense is being tested again, its allies no longer control the pace of the crisis. And its Arab neighbors, once more cautious, are starting to act as if they've realized that fear of Tehran can no longer be the rule in the region. The death of the anti-AIS and pro-Palestine activists in the United States, found dead in Ireland, also entered the international public debate through another path: immigration, ideological activism, and real risk. The case is still under investigation, but the suspect mentioned by the Irish police is said to be an immigrant with whom she had a relationship. This helps us show how foreign policy, activism, and immigration mix in narratives that often ignore real dangers until it's too late. The big pressure tonight is on the official silence from whoever pulled the trigger against Iran. If Gulf Arab nations acted on their own, the whole situation becomes much bigger. In that case, Iran wouldn't be facing just Israel and the United States. It would be facing the reaction of neighbors who spend too much time listening to threats, watching the regime arm radical groups, and trying to protect vital energy routes while Tehran played with chaos. Tehran aimed to be the center of the threat, but is now realizing the cost of being targeted from multiple sides at the same time. Thank you for watching until the end. Support our project and contribute financially through the Pix key that appears on your screen. We are an independent channel focused on telling you the truth. Your contribution helps us keep going.